You know, I've just seen a magpie with its foot. Do you call it its foot? Its claw on a blue tit, and the blue tit was struggling. It's fair to say, and the magpie was
will do. They're little.
plucking feathers out of it.
Gosh,
It was quite hard to watch, but it's a bird eat bird world, isn't it? This is a podcast in which two friends talk about the pleasures, absurdities, and imperfections of being human. I'm Simon Ellis.
and I'm Lee Miller. Welcome to Midlifing.
How are you?
I am fabulous.
How's your scent?
Super cool.
How's your scent this morning?
Well, interesting. I'm wearing yesterday's t-shirt because I've not jumped in the shower because I've been doing some housework. But I still smell of yesterday's scent and I smell lovely.
Oh.
But I am still going to have a shower shortly.
Why do you... No, let's not. Let's not go down that particular cleanliness rabbit hole.
As in, why am I going to have a shower if I still smell nice?
But yeah.
Because I don't feel nice, Simon.
Ah, I see.
It's like the idea of not cleaning my teeth twice a day is anathema to me.
Ah, so do you think they're more or less sort of similar in the sense of personal hygiene? Like, you know, not cleaning your teeth twice a day, it's not great for your teeth.
Yeah, but also it's what you get used to the feeling of, isn't it?
Right.
I like the feeling of nice shiny teeth. I like the feeling of skin that is fresh.
Yeah, and do you use
a body that is fresh?
What kind of soap do you use in the shower?
I just use a bar of soap.
Yeah, is it fancy soap or is it
Nope.
like expensive plain soap? Like I have expensive plain soap.
I'm using up a Castelbel from Portugal that somebody gave us at Christmas in a stocking of some description, and so I'm using that up. It's down to the absolute tiniest of slivers.
Ah, I gotcha. I like that. I use a Parisian soap from it's Marseille olive oil soap.
Yes, I'm familiar with the brand, and I am familiar with it in your bathroom.
Yeah,
you've used it for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah, quite a long time now. Yeah. Not much changes. Not much changes.
Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose, n'est pas?
Exactly. It's exactly what I was thinking. Oui, monsieur. Oui, monsieur.
Oui, monsieur.
Voudrais un pain au chocolat, s'il vous plaît?
Où se trouve mon pantalon? Okay, let's...
Shall we dive in?
Schoolboy French. Yes! You're going first because you had a thing.
Okay, I'm going first because a few weeks ago I was talking with an Italian friend, and one of the things I do, you know, when I'm reading Italian stuff, I mark things that I don't quite understand or that I think that like there's something about the syntax which is a little bit which I go, I wonder. And so I was asking him some questions. He goes, "What book is this?" And it was a book about it's a book, an Italian book. It's a large book about climate change. And he said, "Oh, you believe in that, do you?" And I said,
"That's a can of worms."
Well, it was a little bit. I did say, well, I think it doesn't matter whether I believe in it or not. And, you know, we had a conversation about, you can imagine what comes after skepticism towards anthropogenic climate change. You know, one might be, I don't know, the pandemic. And it was interesting because, and my thing is not about to talk about those things because that would be rather banal because you and I would probably just agree too much, which would really be boring. But, you know, it's that thing that you hear someone say, well, it's not that I don't believe in the pandemic. And then I'm kind of going, well, what? And then goes, and I'm just skeptical. And the climate change thing's always sort of irritates me slightly because I kind of go, well, I said, are we experts? But, when I read it, like 99.5% of people who are experts agree that it's because of humans, right? Because this change is happening because of, right? And as Finn said last weekend, what I want to know is about the 0.05% that don't. Like, what are they on? Anyway, I get science in the sense that I get that, that's the kind of way in which it works slowly and gradually towards. But I did ask him, and of course, this is not really about him. It's, people, we all think the things we think and believe the things we believe. But I did say, when was the last time you changed your mind? And he said, oh, that's a good question. And that's where we left it. And so I'm going to ask you, and maybe we've kind of had variations on this before, but I wanted to know when something that mattered to you, not, I was going to go to this and then I decided to do this, but do you have any sense of when was the last time you changed your mind?
I think my mind changing is a little bit like the climate catastrophe. It creeps up on me.
So there's no kind of clear... Or
it's,
upon reflection, you think, I've changed my mind, even if it might be. I remember 3 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I had this particular thought or this particular belief.
Oh, it's so hard, isn't it? Because I'm not the same person I was a year ago. And so it doesn't surprise me that I feel slightly differently about things. It also doesn't surprise me when I feel the same way about things either. There's kind of those things that abide and those things that shift. I think, though, that much like... It's like it doesn't happen like an avalanche. It happens like a tipping of scales for me, I think. That I have a perspective, and the perspective is usually influenced by what I understand through what I've read. And then my perspective will shift based upon what I understand as a result of what I've read. So if the literature starts to change, or if I start to read different sources, then there are more weights on the other side of the balance and it starts to tip. So I think that's what happens. And because my natural state, as I think anybody who's listened to this podcast will know, is that I am binary and I am constantly fighting against binary. I'm constantly fighting against yes or no because my natural state is yes or no. I'm trying so hard as a human being to occupy maybe, but I am constructed to go yes, no, love, hate. I'm very binary like that, and I am trying. So that means that I don't think there are many periods of time where I have a flick switched. Nope. A switch flicked.
I think I like a flick switched. I think a flick switch is a kind of like I think it's kind of a dance you do late at night. I'm off to do the flick switch.
Yeah. Sounds like you should.
Yeah.
I think for me it's a kind of a tipping over time based upon information.
So
I can't put a finger on a moment, I'm afraid.
No. I guess that's not. I guess my question wasn't that, but like, is there? So when you say, and I'll just repeat that, which is, so is there something over the course of a period of time where you look back and go, yes, I believe different things. Like, what comes to mind?
Oh yeah, immediately the thing that comes to mind is questions around trans bodies. Yeah, I think probably when the conversations emerged, I was much more, not in a gender critical space, because I don't think I've ever really occupied a gender critical space, because, see every episode where I've ever talked about Derrida, because I'm broadly speaking from a post-structuralist bent, I tend to think of everything as a social construction. I think of everything as constructed through language. So my understanding of gender has always been, but it's just how we perform it, isn't it? And I don't really, and I don't get mega tied up in the biological determinants of it, because people will go, yeah, but men have got greater upper body strength and that's provable, until you go and find someone who's littler and weaker, and then you find a woman who's bigger and strong, and you kind of go, well, no, not always, isn't it? So it's like you there's always a slippiness there.
Yeah, there's overlap. They're talking about general tendencies there. On average, men are stronger than women. That doesn't mean there aren't overlaps. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, but I think the fact that you've got overlaps is where you kind of go, well, the binary is a little bit crude. And so that, for me, the binary of male behaviours and female behaviours is a little bit crude. So I came into those emergence probably around about, I guess it would be the late 2000 and aughts to the mid 2010s, where that conversation really started to pick up, where there was a greater representation of trans bodies in media. And I think I probably found myself on the side of, I don't really know what the fuss is about. It's all just a gender performative, so I don't really know why, blah, 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 blah. And then as time has gone along, I've realised, it sort of doesn't matter my perspective on what I think is about the notion of how we perform the self, because I sit in a body that feels stable in terms of its identity. I've never questioned my maleness. I've questioned my masculinity, which is a different thing. Sure. But then when we start to get into having conversations and hearing from the perspectives, and a lot of it is to do with having taught transgender students and just kind of going, oh, wow, this is just not how I'm living. So I have to shut up and listen. And I think I have now very strongly swung to the a trans woman is a woman, trans man is a man. There's no debate. I don't feel there's a need to go, yes, but. I don't feel the need to equivocate. I'm going to locate my response entirely in the narrative of those people with the lived experiences. And I don't believe that it undermines the lived experiences of others, because we should all be able to manage that space congruently.
So you have gone to back to your binary there. There's no, when you say no debate. But not binary in terms of the gender.
Yeah. I think probably, interestingly, maybe when I came into the conversation, maybe I was at the tipping point. I was probably in that, like, I don't suppose it matters, really.
Yeah.
So I was kind of, that was the bit in the middle. But
it's the opposite of what you were just saying, that you tend towards yes, no. But here you were in a situation where you were actually kind of in the middle ground, but you've gone towards the yes or the no, depending on whatever it is you want to describe it.
Yeah, and I think probably I've gone towards a fixed position because of the vehemence with which the opposite perspective is held.
So it's sort of a reaction to the reaction, kind of.
It's more about that if I want to occupy a space of allyship, which I think for the most part I do in all territories, I want to try to be on the side of the people whose voices are less visible or heard, really. Visible's not what
or endangered
voices. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Those people who are more at risk, I think I want to be on their side more. And if my equivocation makes them feel unsafe, it is much easier for me to equivocate. It is much less easy for me to equivocate, to feel comfortable about sitting on the fence, even if intellectually the space that fence makes more sense.
So it's so interesting. It's interesting you talked about. I'm not sure I'd ever say this sentence ever in my life, but it's interesting that you mentioned Derrida. Because you sort of said, I adopt a kind of constructionist perspective. That is that human beings, we're constructing ourselves all the time, that we're not fixed entities, etc. Right? Is that a fair enough kind of summary of that?
Yeah. I would, if I was going to be like a cliche, I would say we're human doings, not human beings.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's John Kabat-Zinn says the same thing. Yeah, so I don't think that's a cliche. I think it's a really useful shorthand. Actually, I don't. Cliches can be also useful shorthands. I guess that's partly why they become cliches. So I found that interesting that you said that. Does that mean that sounds like you were kind of your worldview is heavily influenced from when you kind of encountered that kind of theory, if you think back to before you had those encounters, do you see yourself as still someone who felt like we were just performing and we were making up things as we were going along, and that a sort of more of a like intuitively constructionist perspective, as opposed to one that was kind of tied to theory?
So if I think back to my masters, because all of this happened when I did my masters at Lancaster.
So not even BA, BA.
No. I struggle to imagine who that person was, other than...
You mean before the MA?
Before the MA, other than he was certain. He was certain. But he was certain that he didn't really know anything. But what he did know, he was certain about it.
Yeah.
And I've just got less and less certain as I've gotten older.
You've got less and less certain,
really
but you've also got, but you still feel like your tendencies towards polarities, yes, no, or binaries, I should say.
But the difference is, I think that's always been the case. When I was 15, I was yes or no. Now I can see that that's not, that my tendency to say yes, no is not where you stop. You have to go, ooh, hang on. It's like training yourself to be left-handed when you're really right-handed, or the other way around.
And that you think you learnt that as a consequence of the kind of reading and stuff you're doing. So basically, it sounds like you're saying that education has changed you.
I mean, it might be shocking to hear somebody who works in the higher education system in the UK still believes that education is transformative, but I do believe that education is transformative. I think it changes the way we are. It's fundamental.
It's a curious thing, because I think there's something about I think I'm a little. I mean, I don't know what the difference is, and maybe we can figure out what the difference is. But what you're talking about there seems different from, let's say, educating people about the dangers of cigarette smoking. That education, as far as I'm aware, the little bit of reading I've done makes sweet fuck all difference to people's behaviour when it comes to things like cigarettes or drinking or the kind of food they're eating. Let's talk about ultra-processed foods, for example, that one might know and understand and be educated quite profound, to a very high degree about, let's say, the benefits and dangers of benefits of good nutrition versus ultra-processed foods. I'm just pulling that one out of the air a little bit, but that it makes very little difference to behaviour. And so can you... I'm trying to figure out what the difference is in terms of Is it one thing about facts, and one thing's about a kind of worldview, and that facts make... If you've got, I'm pretty sure that if you've got strong beliefs in something, that facts make very little difference.
I think you might be right there. I think that to go to your example there of smoking, maybe a better one is seatbelt use. For me, in terms of, we don't educate people into seatbelt use because here's a picture of somebody thing. Here's a picture of somebody who went through a windscreen. Look how dead they are. They're like really dead. And it's like, yeah, but that won't happen to me if my car crashes. No, it will. No, it won't. It won't, because we all engage in that magical thinking where we think, well, but that's not me, is it? And the only way that we really make that cultural shift happen is through legislation. And we say, we will make it culturally inappropriate to not wear seatbelts. And we will do that by saying, I can't believe you want to kill children. I can't believe you want babies to die. We'll do that thing, which is, a lot of the way that they did it. And then we will similarly do the same thing with smoking, because we kind of do the pictures on cigarette packets, and the rate of smoking in the UK has dropped significantly, and not because of pictures on packets.
It's about legislation.
It's about legislation. It's like you're not allowed to smoke inside, and we live in a country where it pisses down most of the year. So you then balance, like, how desperately do you want to smoke that cigarette versus
quite a lot
how
of desperate people outside
be.
Pubs, it would seem, in London. When it's amazing how many people on the worst of worst evenings will be out, sort of hunched over with their pints and their cigarettes, hanging on to the dream.
But compare that to what it was like 20, 30 years ago, where it was just routine inside. And, so there's a level of education, there's a level of legislation. It's the two, I think, that are in lockstep with one another. But when it comes to the idea of facts don't change your mind as much as education,
kind of cultural,
yeah.
or legislation, you're saying then, though.
Yeah, I think it's both. I think there's an educational part but legislation backs up the education. I think you're right about I wasn't being educated with facts. I was being educated with views. I was being educated with, what if you see the world this way rather than that way? What if you recognize that the world is not a fixed, determinate certainty, but it's a constantly mobile, changing, yes, but if you do this, this might happen. Oh, but if we see it through this perspective, this might happen. And for me, that's been like really, really powerful, because as we've moved through different theoretical paradigms, so like at the moment, in a lot of critical writing, we're moving sort of out of decolonization into indigenous thinking and indigenous theories, which of course is in dialogue with that, but that decolonization grows out of queer theory grows out of feminism. So there's this kind of sort of gentle progression of things that are connected but different.
Yeah, you're talking, I mean, just to be clear, you're talking about in the humanities, in the university, as a phenomenon, yeah. That kind of those shifts and those,
but that's where I've been educated.
It was just the way it sounded like you're talking about. It sounded like you were saying it's a kind of, they're paradigmatic in terms of the world, but it's a very particular part of understanding or approach to the world that exists inside the academy. Yeah, I think it's easy if we're inside that ivory tower to overestimate its importance and its value and its impact on the world outside of the ivory tower. I think it's easy to overestimate that. I think most of the things we're talking about here, I think most people, not listeners, but most people in the world would not care less about.
But I would agree. I would agree with you up to a point, except the whole narratives around trans rights, which is really loud in the UK right now, really, really loud.
I think it's loud in your circles. I think it's very easy to overestimate how loud that is. But
but remember that you're not reading news.
Yeah, but you'll also be reading a particular kind of news, won't you? You'll be, it'll be based on social media. It'll be The Guardian. It'll be.
No, yeah, but I mean the discussion from both sides. So you've got the Daily Mail who's arguing one point, and you've got the Guardian to a certain degree who's arguing another point. What I mean is that culture war is happening in public. Kemi Badenoch is basing a lot of her narratives around the idea that, well, it's okay, trans people can use disabled bathrooms, which is really, I'm not going to get into the problematic nature of that, but what I'm saying is that those conversations are happening way beyond a kind of an ivory tower conversation, and they are genuinely impacting the social debate, even and to the point where I think most people are having an opinion about it because of how it's being portrayed in mainstream media. I would gently disagree, I think, with the idea that most people don't give a shit about it. I think most people are being forced to have a perspective because of the binary narrative of this is good or this is bad that is happening in mainstream media.
Yeah, and you're right. I'm not really participating, and I don't have any sense of how loud that I was really making an assumption. Not completely, but mostly, making a pretty big assumption.
I'm thinking. This is not in my circle. I walk past a house every day that has a handwritten sign in the window in Totnes, but trans women are women, and it's like that's just in a window. It's so there's a sense that somebody who has been exercised enough by the narratives that are happening in wider cultural society, and it's done with felt tip pens and crayons. So it makes me think that this is probably coming from a place. Oh, how do I say this without it sounding snotty and demeaning? And I don't mean it to be either of those things. This is somebody who's trying to communicate their allyship rather than is sitting thinking about what Judith Butler has said about the idea of trans bodies.
Yes.
This has suddenly gone off the rails and become a thing that I didn't intend to talk about, but I wasn't. Because, like I say, Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm arguing with you unnecessarily because I don't want to. Or
No, I don't.
that...
I don't think we're arguing. I mean, I don't.
I worry that I'm being more. I worry that I'm being more shouty than I feel. Only in the sense that when you say I don't think many people are worried about that, my concern is that quite a lot of people are in an uninformed kind of way.
I said this conversation, and I guess I was thinking. I mean, I was really thinking more about the nature of the ivory tower and the way and the consequences that happened in the ivory tower. I think I was.
I was thinking about the woke narratives that do spill out of the ivory tower, but they have had an impact on, I think, lived experiences.
It's funny you mention that because I think if I and with running out of time, but I think my attitudes towards wokeness I think if I were asking myself the same question I asked you, which is what has changed the most, how have I changed the most? I think it would be about the kind of idea of wokeness and how I think I feel much more conservative in relation to wokeness than I did, say, 7 years ago.
Well, that's really interesting, and that you managed to answer the question in like about 7 sentences, and it took me nearly half an hour to do it.
Yeah, but I
sorry.
think it's also this is one of those rare situations where I'd thought about it, if I were answering the question myself.
Yeah.
So I felt like I didn't have a pre-planned answer in the sense how I'd talk about it, but I certainly had this. I think that's one thing I could talk about, for put it like that. So yeah, I think you're being a bit hard on yourself, and also you're going to edit this to make it like it's just super even.
It'll be a really short episode.
Yeah. Well, 6 minutes. I changed my mind on this. I chose. That was great. I don't think we were disagreeing. I think there were moments where I disagreed, but I haven't voiced that disagreement. But I think that's partly because I don't think it's the point of this for us to get into. I don't know. How interesting would it really be for you to go? For me to go, no, I disagree, I think this, and you go, I disagree, I think it's this. Like,
no, it probably wouldn't be. You're right. I think what I meant was
break the relationship too. That's the danger.
Well, I mean, I think that's an interesting one, though, isn't it? Because I think we both have talked enough over the last 5 years on this podcast to know that we do sit on the different side of certain political narratives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not worth digging into, because one of the things I am absolutely certain about is me arguing the toss with you will not change your mind. And it's much more useful for me to try to understand why you feel things about particular things so that I can be more compassionate, not to you, but to
heaven forbid.
No, in the sense that I don't need to.
Yeah.
I don't need
to increase your compassionometer with me.
No, exactly. But there are people who are at the, let's say, if you're at the thin end of the wedge of intolerance, which I wouldn't use that language to describe you. I would not. I said if.
Yep. But it is great.
The
hypothetical is
people,
great.
But there are people who are very clearly at the most thickest edge of the wedge that I would find very difficult to find compassion for.
Yeah.
And if I can find compassion for those tiny hair's breadth differences between you and I, then it stands me in more stead when it comes to encountering people who I just think, you are so far away from where I am in the way that I think. How can I find compassion for you? How can I find a way that allows you back in? Because if I don't, then those people are always going to be
othered.
Yeah,